Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are both very excited to be talking to you about a real humdinger. What was once thought perhaps would become a lost film was banned after its release. The 1981 horror, dare I say classic, Possession.
Oh, Mark, your wife keeps her own secrets.
Make her talk to me. It'll be the way that she wants. Tell me.
Well, I think what you want to do to Bob is just...
Inhuman. So what you're doing must be human. What's gonna happen to us?
After you!
Stop coming!
Why, I have to go!
I'll follow you!
You can hate me as much as you like, but it's you who wants to know things for me. So please make it possible.
Ugly. You've hardened. For the first time, you look vulgar to me.
You are not different from anyone else. We are all the same, but in different words, different bodies, different versions. Like insects, meat.
What is it?
Do you have a synopsis for it, Mr. Huddleston?
I do. So, as you said, this is a 1981 film, and I'm going to try not to butcher names here, directed by Andrzej Zulawski. And it stars Isabelle Adjani, Sam Neill, and some other people that I got to watch by their names. The synopsis is: after Anna, Isabelle Adjani, reveals to her husband, Mark, Sam Neill, that she's having an affair, she leaves him and their son. Mark is devastated and seeks out Heinrich, the man who cuckolded him, only to receive a beating. After a series of violent confrontations between Mark and Anna, Mark hires a private investigator to follow her. Anna descends into madness, and it's soon clear that she is hiding a much bigger secret, one that is both inexplicable and shocking. So this was a first-time watch for both of us. I kind of became aware of this movie in the last year or so. It started showing up on a lot of lists of, this is a horror movie, the best horror movies that you haven't seen. It was really hard to find. And Shudder, streaming service Shudder, it was I don't know if they paid for the remaster, but it was remastered to 4K. And it is now a Shudder exclusive. So if you have Shudder, this is on there. Or if you've always wanted to see this movie, this would be a good reason to get Shudder. So let's go to you first, Chris. One of the really big questions that I have about this is I'm really curious as an actor what you thought of these performances. because they get really over the top. Maybe I don't know if over the top is the right phrase, but anyway. So what did you think?
Well, it's definitely intense. It's super intense. I think this is some of my favorite work I've ever seen Sam Neill do.
Mhm.
And this actress looks super familiar to me, but I can't remember what I would have seen her in otherwise.
While you are speaking, I'm going to look.
You're gonna look it up
and see. Yeah,
I think it gives her
she's in.
more.
Did you ever see the Werner Herzog Nosferatu from the 70s?
No.
Okay, she's in that. That's one thing that I know her from. She's in The Tenant, which I think is a Polanski movie, I believe. Yeah, I don't know that there would be. I don't know. Beyond that, I don't know that there would be, but she definitely does look familiar. Yeah, The Tenant is a Polanski film. I've seen that. But yeah, continue.
I think this director has gotten really primal, really raw emotional work out of all of the characters in this film, but both of the leads, particularly her. There were some scenes. The whole movie it's long, and it's like 2 hours, just over 2 hours long. I don't think it needs to be that long. I think it's obvious when you watch it, some of the stuff that could have been pared back a little bit. There are scenes where she is having sort of physical, paroxysms, almost fits that go on and on and on. And the one I'm thinking of in particular, we spoil these, by the way. We're going to spoil this movie. So just be warned if you've never heard our podcast before, we talk about it all from start
I
to
would
finish.
say if this is a movie, if you have been curious about this, watch it. I mean,
I
it's
agree.
definitely worth checking out. Whether you will,
You should have the experience going into it, I think, clean if you can.
because I mean, I think I could maybe say this is unlike any other movie that I've ever seen before. I can't really think of necessarily something I would compare this to. It's definitely.
I
There's
agree.
been a lot of chatter about this. There were a lot of people saying, "Oh, finally I can see this," and I've seen a lot of people online say, who are probably just kind of conventional horror fans who are just like, "That's the worst movie that I've ever seen." So
Right.
this is very much not a movie for everybody
Right.
at all.
And it's not trying to be.
Mm-mm.
I think it feels like an incredibly personal movie. And
He
my
was
hunch,
probably going through some stuff when he made this.
my hunch is that it's very grounded in singular vision, the director's singular vision, that a lot of this is personal. And anyway, to just speak to your question, this is the one scene in the sort of subway station where she's flailing around just on and on and on. I actually started to worry. I was like worried about her neck. Like she's just thrashing and thrashing. And I was afraid, she was sort of getting dizzy and still spasming. And I was afraid she'd accidentally hit her head against the tiles of the subway wall, like hard. Like, in acting school, we had sword fighting class where we, it was a classical acting program. So we learned how to stage sword fight. And one of the things that was interesting to me that I wouldn't have anticipated about that is, if you practice anything, you get pretty good at it. And when you're doing a sword fight on stage, there is a line you don't want to cross, which is you can get so good at the fight that you're doing it so fast that the audience can't follow the choreography, which defeats the purpose, right? A choreographer designs the fight to tell its own kind of story. It's not arbitrary, right? It's a dance that has been designed by somebody to tell a story. So if you do it too fast, the audience can't track it. The other thing that can happen is you can make it seem too real and the audience gets scared. And that takes them out of the play, right? So you don't want to take the audience out of the play and have them worry about the actors inadvertently skewering each other.
Right.
And that had never occurred to me. I'm like, well, wouldn't you want to make it, if you're going to fight with swords, wouldn't you want to make it look as plausible as possible? And the answer is actually no, because people want part of you, you're watching an entertainment and there's a part of your brain that wants to just relax into that universe. And then if you're worried about the performer, your brain backs back out of that, right? Now,
and people want to, in a scary situation, people want to be scared a little bit, but they don't really want to feel unsafe, or that something unsafe is happening.
Exactly. And I would argue, my hunch is that this director would have said good.
Yeah.
I want it to feel visceral is the one word that I would use. If you said, what's it like? What's possession like in a single word? I'd have said visceral. Like it really is. Time and time again, the movie is it's like having your guts ripped out. It's emotionally, it's really wrenching and raw. I would agree. It's unlike anything I can't say what I would compare it to. I spent the majority of this film trying to sort of figure out what was going on, or trying to anticipate where it was going or what this story is about. And by the end of it, I sort of had the realization, I said, oh, I think this movie is just kind of a fever dream. It's about, broadly speaking, it's a kind of a visual poem about the emotional scope of, it's a divorce. It's a man and a woman who were in love and they have a child and their marriage is breaking apart. And there's symbolism and there's kind of evocative imagery and it doesn't all make any sense. Right? I mean, it's not a movie that you're supposed to be like, that represents this and this means that. And, oh, I see. It was all just a big allegory for this. I think the closest you can get to that is saying that this movie is trying to create the experience, a very specific personal experience, which is why I think is the director had, of divorce and a messy divorce, an emotionally traumatic breakup. And some scenes just seem to be about that, evoking a feeling. And some scenes seem to be literally like that time when, I met the man she left me for or something. You know what I mean? Like some of the stuff feels incredibly specific in a literal way. And some of it feels incredibly specific in an emotional way, but not specific in this circumstance. Like it doesn't, the scene I'm thinking of in the subway where she's thrashing around, she has a kind of abortion, a miscarriage. She has a kind of it ends with her collapsed on her knees and her eyes. She has Sam Neill has got amazing eyes too, but she's got these remarkable eyes. And they're
she's
sort of
just stunning,
rolled up in her head, and she's kind of hemorrhaging blood. And it's like, it made me think of the white fluid that the androids and aliens have.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah.
It doesn't look human, and it doesn't, it looks like sort of synthetic milk liquid. And she sort of starts hemorrhaging it out of her vagina and her ears. And I think even it looks like her eye, she's weeping it and it's coming out of her nose and her mouth. And it's the climax to a really upsetting scene. And it's a very upsetting visual. Incredibly, I thought it was also a sort of in a horror movie way, was kind of beautiful, the way the red and the white kind of mixed and pulled around her.
Right.
And she was her body was finally still. I mean, it didn't look rapturous. It looked but she wasn't thrashing anymore. And I thought this movie played a lot with stuff like that, like in tortured movement and how that resolves into something else, how there's a kind of a relief, and at least it's not that other thing anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance is a word that was pointed up a couple of times. So I feel like I've gotten away from your original question, but I feel like this is not a movie to interpret literally.
No.
It's an experience, and it's absolutely a horror film, right?
Yeah.
It's set in Berlin, right? And when the
Yep.
wall is still up. So
Yep. They're right by the wall. You
it's
can see
very
it.
much this sort of divided. It's a city that has been cut in half by this very unnatural wall that has men guarding it and are constantly vigilant. And the whole movie is about, divide and disruption and not knowing what's going on and wanting to get back to where you were. And, and that's just reiterated again and again and again. And the peaceful moments in this film are overshadowed by the sense that the division, you're not away from the division. It's just lurking around the corner. It's going to happen again. Right. I don't know. That was a long rambling rant, but what do you talk for a while?
Yeah. So, my first thought with this movie is this print is beautiful, just
Looks
fantastic.
great. Absolutely.
And some of the much of the cinematography in this is some of the best that I have seen recently. New movies, old movies. There are scenes where they're out on the streets in Berlin and the camera kind of rotates around, and it's just stunning, I thought. I felt a little in the beginning, maybe I had some difficulty kind of getting my bearings. You have this very cinematic, it's very cinematic with the look, with the cinematography, but early on, the performances, it felt a lot like a play to me. There's a scene when they're in a restaurant and they're at tables that are sort of beside each other, and one's on one side, one's on the other, like not facing each other, but they're talking. And that just felt very much like that could have been a stage performance. That kind of went away after a time. I don't know if I just kind of got used to the language of the film or whatever. You have one thing I think definitely a lot of people will not like about this is the dialogue mostly is not the way real people speak. I wondered if that possibly could be so the director is Polish. I don't know if that could have been a language issue or it was just purposeful.
I think it was purposeful in the same way that the staging was purposeful.
Right.
In the same way that cafe scene is a perfect example. There's a corner, right, that's facing the camera, and then there's a table on the left of the corner and a table 90-degree corner and a table on the right. And he is sitting with his back to the wall and she is sitting with her back to the adjacent wall. So they're sitting beside each other, but facing 90 degrees apart at separate tables. And the camera's right in the middle, aiming at the corner. And you're right, it's very theatrical. It's a very theatrical conceit. The people don't do that, and they both have their hands flat, on the table. They have their hands flat on the table, and it's very staged. And I think that the language and the dialogue is all very much intentional in the same way.
Mm-hmm. The acting performances, particularly her, like, you brought up the subway scene, and that has become kind of a meme online. And it is, that scene is incredible. I've seen some criticism of these from some people that they've said that the performances are over the top, which is clearly what he was going for. But I just, it seemed like that scene was one continuous take. I don't think they cut away. And I just thought, man, I wonder if they just did one take on this, because from an, and I mean, you're the actor, so, I wouldn't know this, but
They'd have to get her another dress. They'd have to clean her up. They'd have to let her rest.
yeah, and to get into that state multiple times, I mean, and how do you, from an acting standpoint, how do you get that frantic? I mean,
it was exhausting to watch.
And she, I forget what she won. I think she won Best Actor at Cannes the year that this came out. But this could have, these genre films like this don't typically do well with awards in general. But I mean, just that scene alone to me is like a Oscar-worthy performance,
And it's like a Beatles album, in that, the Beatles had put out an album of songs and there would be 5 platinum singles on one album, which most bands are lucky if they've got one like hit single on an album, and the Beatles would have. And this film, there's probably 5 or 6 scenes that are these sort of, I have never seen anything like that before. I'm never going to forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the equivalent of a hit single. You're just in film, you're kind of like, oh my God, that scene, and there's this movie is full of them. I still think it's too long.
It's too long. Yeah.
Because it is such an emotional roller coaster, and it's really a roller coaster through emotional hell, that it's exhausting and traumatic, and it doesn't need to be over 2 hours long to achieve that. I understand that's what it's going for.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could have been an hour and a half, and you could have cut out some air, and you could have left. I mean, you could have trimmed out some of that scene where that didn't need to go on that long. And I think you could have shortened that a little bit. I guess if he wanted it all to be one take, you couldn't really cut into it without ruining that. But you get what I'm saying, right? I mean,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
He was convulsing for, it felt like 5 minutes, but it couldn't possibly have been that long. But
and I think I think this would be an endurance test for a lot of people. I was never bored. I mean, there was always something interesting happening, I felt. So I definitely agree with you that it's too long. I mean, it could have been a 90-minute film, and it wouldn't have hurt it at all. I was excited to see this, especially once I found out that it was going to be on Shudder. I said, we've got to do this one. And so I was really excited to see it.
Did you know anything about it before? Because I did not know anything about it.
Very little. I mean, I just watched the trailer, and I purposely stayed away from, I didn't want to read anything about it because I didn't really want to have any spoilers. The trailer makes, you watch the trailer and you think, wow, this is going to be terrifying. And it's very much a horror movie in that you watch for a while and you wonder, it's kind of a drama in a way as much as anything. But eventually there is an actual monster in this that we see
pretty sooner than I would have thought, because at first I thought, I was like, oh, okay, is she possessed by the devil? Like, is it a demonic possession? Because she keeps sort of leaving, but she seems to want to stay, but she can't stay, and it seems to be tearing her apart. And he's like, what? Just tell me what it is, And I think, oh, it's Satan or this demon, and she's going and she's possessed by this demon. And then even when you get to a place where he hires someone to tail her, and we see this first, and it is visceral and gross, and you can't quite get your head around what it is exactly, but it is supernatural. You go, oh, it's an alien, or it's a manifestation, or it's something that's got this power over her. But there it is. And I feel like it was only about half an hour into the movie. So it's a 2-hour movie. And I thought, well, we're not going to see this thing until Act 3.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, the guy follows in. We see him taking it in, and he is shocked by it, and we see it. And I was shocked by it. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, so there is a character that is this tentacly gross. So did you get Lovecraftian vibes from this movie?
Yeah, I did, and I wondered about that because it seems like we get so much Lovecraft stuff now. It's like it almost seems like every horror thing you see is it's Lovecraftian. I don't know if Lovecraft was that big of a deal at the time. Maybe I don't know.
People say Lovecraftian, and I think they mean different things. I think they're thinking of Cthulhu, and they're thinking of this sort of what looks like a mind flayer. It's got kind of a squid for a head, and it's got lots of tentacles.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of writhing tentacles, and they think, oh, it's Lovecraftian. But
Right.
what I think of when I think of Lovecraftian, or from In the Mountains of Madness, is the idea of what is horror, right? This sort of existential unmooring of the mind from what we understand to be reality.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to create in the reader the experience of what true horror is, not witnessing a murder. I'm not saying murder is not horrific, but horror in the sense of losing your mind, of horror that drives you mad.
Mm-hmm.
It's so other than the reality we experience. And I feel like a lot of the horror in this movie is about that kind of existential insanity. Like,
Yeah.
she'll get close to it, or the other guy will get close to it, and they start doing these kind of like, they're like, almost like something is controlling their mind. Like their brain can't take it, whether they're
You
being
definitely felt that
controlled or
way
they're-
with the boyfriend, that it was like he was just overwhelmed by how horrified he was.
And then when the second, or maybe it's the first time you see it, it's sort of this thing on the bed, and it has these kind of writhing tentacles. I mean, the two things together said Lovecraft to me. That
Mm-hmm.
not that I mean, maybe there's stuff from a Lovecraft story in this. I don't know his entire body of work, but those two things made me think, oh, this is horror of the coming apart of the mind, right? And it's trying to create what that experience is like, watching the woman you love go through this, and then start what it feels like if you're coming apart in their brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely, felt that a bit, watching it. I don't think I thought about Lovecraft too much, but yeah, I mean, I think it definitely, that idea of just because everybody in this movie is insane, basically, or seems insane, especially the two of them. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of insane behavior between the two of them. But I forget where I had at some point that I was going to go with. But
well, you had said that eventually we do see a monster.
Oh yeah, eventually we do see the monster. The I was expecting this to be a really terrifying movie, and I wouldn't really, the monster is creepy and everything. Oh, and I should say the creature, and I should have looked up the name ahead of time. The creature design, the guy that did that the next year in 1982 won an Oscar for E.T. So he designed E.T.
That's the other thing, is as you're starting to watch this, there's credits at the top of the movie, and it says special creature effects by this guy. And so you go, oh, there's going to be, right? I mean, you don't see somebody doesn't get a credit at the top for, it's like Sam Neill, directed by special creature effects. And you're like,
so yeah, that's a
oh,
giveaway.
this is going to figure prominently in it. Like, we're going to see. I didn't know. I thought it might have been all very Damien, where it's just like, and then bad things happen,
just a psychological,
completely a psychological. I don't know. I had no idea. But then, of course, all the trailers have got like tentacles and stuff all over it. Some of them do. So I'm kind of like, well, what is this movie about?
But so there's definitely a creature, but I mean, I wouldn't say this was particularly scary. I saw one comment from somebody online who said, who really liked the film, and they said it's The Exorcist but scary, which, people generally think of The Exorcist as being a very scary film, So this is more, I don't even know that for the most part I would really call this super disturbing. I mean, it's definitely upsetting, some of the things that you see in this, but it so I wasn't disappointed in any way. I really liked this a lot.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm getting. I think that kind of goes to what I'm thinking about with the Lovecraft references. It's not terror,
mhm.
it's horror,
Yeah.
and it's different,
Right.
right? Friday the 13th is terror. There's a
Mm-hmm.
man with a knife. He's in your dreams. He can come out of the bed. He's behind the door. He's in the mirror, right?
This isn't
It's
a movie
all
that you watch it and then, oh, I'm afraid to go into the dark basement now because maybe that thing is going to be in the, you know what I mean?
right. It's horror, like the guy goes down in the diving bell and witnesses some leviathan of such scope, and that when he comes back up, his hair is snow white and he's lost his
Mhm.
mind. It's existential horror. Like I literally can't get my brain around reality encompassing this, and I'm losing my mind about it. So it
Mhm.
isn't scary,
No.
but it's upsetting
Yeah.
and deeply unsettling. I mean, I think that's what this movie is going for, is sort of pure existential horror of
Right.
like, what is my life without this person? Who am I in the wake of this? Like this thing that's happening and changing that I can't control, that's turning me into something else. It's sort of the I mean, there is some body horror in this, but it's kind of the emotional, mental equivalent of body horror, right? This
Right.
kind of transformation of your psyche and the person you knew and the mother of your child, and looking at her and being like, I don't know who this is anymore,
And I wondered if possession, rather than being possessed by the devil or something like that, is literally wanting to possess someone. He's lost her, or he's losing her, and they're early on in the film when she leaves, he goes through withdrawal, like drug withdrawal.
Yeah.
And he's all pasty and he's shaking and
Like the
convulsing,
DTs.
and yeah, like
the
DTs. Exactly. So I don't know that I've ever seen that presented in a film, that a breakup or the end of love is like
An
going
addict.
through
Yeah.
an addict going through withdrawal.
And so again, it's a theatrical. At first I thought, oh, did he crawl into a bottle and now and looking back on it, I'm like, no, it's just the experience. It's just what it felt like. He couldn't get out of bed. He ached. It was tearing him apart, like the DT. So there's a lot of simile and metaphor, visual in this film. And I think that if you look at it through that lens, like I wouldn't have fought so hard to make sense of this movie if I watched it again. No, well, I mean, knowing where it goes, because I think it is like a poem. It's not literal. It's evocative.
Mhm. Yeah.
It tells a story through the experience of it.
Right. And I would not be able to say what I think exactly what this movie is about, other than a terrible breakup. I mean, I think they're definitely, I think he's making comparison between this couple breaking up and a country being split into, and he grew up in communism, and I'm sure there's probably some references to communism here, but like there's a thing early. Oh, one thing that really made me laugh is after watching the movie, I was reading some things about it, reading some articles. And early on in the film, we have Sam Neill, and he goes and meets with these employers of his in this big office room. And they ask him some questions, and they talk about his successor and thing. And there's some question or reference to a man with, if you see a man with pink socks, and then at the end of the film we see a man with pink socks, and I'm just like, what is this? I have no idea what this is supposed to mean. But they do this kind of debriefing with him, and then he walks out and he has a briefcase and he opens it up. There's all this cash in there. And so then there's not really much else about his job. It's just like he doesn't work again after that. I guess he just has enough money that he doesn't need to work for a time or whatever. And then at the end, there's this shootout with the police that kind of comes from nowhere. But I read this article afterwards, and they, it's kind of outlining what it did. And it says that he's an international spy. And I thought, could anybody watch this movie and come to the conclusion that he's an international spy?
It's so far from what this movie is about and spends time on. But there is this sort of,
it's not really important to the film.
No, but there is this sort of,
I never would have guessed that,
framing of the film that starts with him, he's absentee because he's been on this job and it's secretive.
I thought he was just a salesman,
Well, they say something like, you've been tracking somebody and we want to continue to employ you. And he's like, no, I'm out. And it's all kind of cagey. And then he does the cash. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's like into something slippery. And, but the most important thing is he's secretive and he hasn't been around. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, when they kind of bring it back to justify this kind of car chase and shootout, after everything we've seen in between, I'm like, we're coming back to the guy in the pink socks? Like, what? Yeah. We already know this movie is not about that, right? And I don't know if it's supposed to be that, your real life is still happening, no matter how wrapped up in all of this stuff you are, you still put on your shoes and you go out in the street and other people are dealing with you, from the narrative there. Right? The story of the world is still going on, even though that's not what you've been living. That's as much sense as I could make of it, because it sort of tries to put it back in this frame of like, oh, this is a conventional thriller. And you're like, this is not that.
Right. Yeah. It's all, that felt very much like, just kind of thrown. It's like, hey, we have to have somebody for something for the audience or whatever. But yeah, the pink socks thing felt to me like it's, and I definitely think this, although I liked the movie, I would imagine that this director is incredibly pretentious, and
maybe
I'm just guessing, but it felt like it was almost like the girl with the red coat in Schindler's List, that it's like, oh, we're going to show you this, and then we're going to do a callback to it later, and it's going to be very, very profound. But it didn't feel profound. It just felt like, what is this? I don't know what this is supposed to mean, And like you said, I don't know that that's even really the point. It's I think you saying that it's like a poem is a really great comparison, because it's
so
this film
the
is like
creature, right? This creature turns into him. Right. And he actually, when he finally sees it.
Well, so let me stop you there for just a second, because so in the end, they have this, is that when it's having sex with her, was that him?
Well, it kind of looked like the back of his head,
Okay,
he's standing there watching this. It's on top of her, and it's semi-human and semi-fetal and sort of semi-alien,
because I don't think I really picked up on that it had turned into him, but by the end.
But she said almost there. And I thought, as she's saying she's almost achieved climax, but then later I think I looked back and I thought, no, I think she's saying, I think it's been turning into him the whole time.
It's almost fully transformed. Okay.
And she's somehow, loving it literally, carnally, is somehow driving that transformation. And almost there means it's almost like it was supposed to look familiar to him, because it becomes this pretty creepy sort of alien looking kind of ideal, younger, smoother, blanker him. It's played by him, obviously. Oh, right. she's in the movie a second time too. She plays the kid's teacher, his son's
Right.
teacher. So he goes to pick his son up from school, which his wife usually does, and she's left him already, but she comes down and says, "Oh, hello," and he grabs her and he's like, "What is this? Some kind of a joke?" You know, he's furious.
She has different color hair and she has green contacts.
Yeah, and he's like, "What with the wig?" And then he sort of realizes, oh, it's not her, but it is played by the same actress. So we're in his shoes, being like, "What
She
the
looks
hell
just
is
like her.
going on here?" Yeah,
So at the end of the film, then
it's never explained or addressed. He
We-
just comes to accept that, oh, it's not her, and it's not her identical twin sister, right? It's just what?
and we don't really get an explanation exactly, but at the end of the film, so he has this shootout with the police, and she shows up there, and then this, I was calling it a clone, is this other version of Sam Neill, and so I guess I didn't pick up on that. So the thing that was having sex with her then because I thought it was like the creature had, I thought the creature impregnated her and then she gave birth to this new Sam Neill. And then the same
Oh.
thing had happened with, I mean, I could be totally wrong about that. I mean, you may be right that the creature was, but I assumed after seeing, after we get the Sam Neill, the second Sam Neill, then I came to the conclusion that the teacher is also a clone of her, that she birthed her somehow. I don't know if I'm wrong about that or not, but
Well, then none of that ever occurred to me. I thought, so the first time we see it, it's this sort of, it's like a wall of slime. It's like a living wall of yuck and a viscera. And yet there's a sort of a head, like, I didn't know if it was something that was coming through from another dimension or what, but there's sort of a head and shoulders that's kind of, moving to indicate that it's alive. That's the first time we see it. The second time we see it, it's this kind of torso on the bed. It's not any bigger than that. It's like if you cut somebody's arms and legs off and it was lying on a bed, and then there's these sort of writhing tentacles, thin, but, kind of lazily moving around on the bed. And she says he's tired because he's been making love to me all night long or something, which is really upsetting, seeing that thing. And the other guy who's witnessing this, who she later cuts up and puts in the fridge, is very upset by it too. The third time we see it is a more human-sized figure kneeling on the ground. It's got a kind of a column for a head, but it has eyes and a mouth, right? Eyes on the side of the head. And there's a push-in shot of it sort of looking up into the camera. It's like has eyes now, and it looks up, and maybe it's at Sam Neill. I can't remember who is seeing it that third time.
I think, is that the Heinrich?
That's
guy
Heinrich. Heinrich sees it in that state. And then the fourth time we see it, it's literally on top of her making love to her. And it's mostly more or less human from the waist up. But it's sort of, I don't know how you'd describe it from the waist down. Sort of a big worm-like weird thing. But the back of its head somehow evoked Sam Neill to me.
I mean, you're probably right about that. I didn't really pick
And
up
I
on
thought
it. I just thought
the thing was evolving, and somehow through making love to her, or her making love to it, it was transforming. And then when it shows up, I mean, when his, I guess, doppelganger or clone or whatever shows up, it doesn't look quite human. It looks like one of those aliens, like body snatcher kind of things. Like, we have taken your form to fit in with you. It looks very other, but it's clearly Sam Neill. And
see, I thought when she was taking those, when she was taking those men in there and killing them, I thought the creature was sort of absorbing them.
Oh,
so I mean, I could be totally wrong, but
well, either way, it doesn't make a literal sense.
No,
Like,
it doesn't make a literal
either way, when you come around to be like, oh, because there's no answer, right?
and
I mean,
then
or It's open to interpretation at the very least, because
Yeah.
the film doesn't explainarate what's happening. It's not an alien that has possessed her and it's creating a new. It's not Starman, right? It's some part of this big allegory and metaphor for what's going on with him emotionally. But it literally manifests and ends in a big car crash and gunfight, and Sam Neill gets shot a bunch and dies. And then this doppelganger comes home where the school teacher is taking care of the kid in his house. And the doppelganger Sam Neill's at the door, and the kid is like, don't open it, right?
And he's
That's
just, you
it.
can
That's the end of the
see
movie.
him, well, you can see him through the kind of smoky glass.
Yeah, and he's being creepy.
And she stands there, and it's a close up on her face. And then we hear war sounds, like bombs dropping and planes and things like that. Which, yeah. And
Emoji, shrug emoji.
yeah. And you almost feel like, again, trying to make literal sense of this is probably, you're probably going to be wrong, but the Sam Neill clone or whatever he is, in the moment, I almost felt like, well, she was creating a better version of him, and then the teacher is a better version of her, but the teacher, there's never anything sinister or weird or anything about her. She just seems almost like she's inherently good. And she's taking care of Bob, the son, which you think a little boy named Bob is odd. But then when the kid starts saying, no, don't answer the door, and the Sam Neill clone, seems like he's evil. And so I don't know. It's almost like, she has been replaced by this better, kinder, not insane version, but he is not. I don't know.
But again, as I've been thinking about it since I watched it a day, or I guess maybe 2 days ago, increasingly I've thought this is not a movie. It's not like, oh, there's a big twist ending, and then you're like, wait, I didn't get it. I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's that kind of movie. I don't think it's supposed to be parsed. I think you're just supposed to go on the ride and feel it all. And you're not supposed to walk away with an answer. You can't take your decoder ring and decode it and be like, oh, it's not a movie with an answer. It's a movie about what happened and how it felt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
which
for
is
sure.
unconventional
Yes.
for a movie. So I mean, if we apply my litmus test of like, did I enjoy this? I did not enjoy this. I did find it absolutely riveting, and I'm really glad we watched it.
Mm-hmm.
I may go back and watch some of it again. I doubt I will go back and watch this whole thing from start to finish again, because
Watch scenes would definitely be interesting.
it's exhausting, Yeah. But there are solid like 5-6 scenes in this that I think I need to see again, because they're just crazy. But I don't think I need to go on the whole ride again. I went on it. I'm glad I did. It's remarkable. I think people are like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. Strongly disagree. I think it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And by that metric, if you're into movies and you want to see movies that don't have anything you can compare them to, you got to see this movie. Like it's crazy.
Not to be, critical of anyone's taste or anything like that, but if you are someone that, you want A, B, C, and you get to the end and
this is not that movie.
Kiss or ride off into the sunset, you're really going to dislike this film.
Yeah.
But it's
and it is not a movie that's made to be enjoyed. I mean, I think even Nightmare on Elm Street, it's made to be enjoyed. Even The Exorcist is made to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and leave you like some horror movies don't have a happy ending, right? But they're designed to be cathartic and satisfying in the way that their genre has set expectations to be. Zombie movies, traditionally nobody gets out alive, nobody survives a zombie movie. That's the whole point. It is the apocalypse, right? So you don't say, well, yay at the end of it, but that's what you're expecting from that thing. And this doesn't really give you any of this. If anything, it sort of frames it like a more conventional movie, but it's almost less satisfying to have that kind of set up or gestured at, and then have the movie continually remind you, like, that's not how it happens. It's, not in life. You don't ride off into the sunset. You don't get an easy answer. There's no explanation, right? And the fact that it's so harrowing and exhausting, it doesn't make it an entertaining watch, but I was riveted by it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely enjoyed it from the standpoint of, like I said, there's so many beautiful shots, it looks so great. And just these, everybody was good in it, but particularly her performance. I mean, just to see someone just commit to the degree that she did, and it's just kind of unlike anything you've ever seen on screen, I guess. And this movie is, to me, was much more about mood than anything. I guess maybe another film that I would somewhat compare it to, I guess, did you ever see Under the Skin?
Yes.
The Scarlett Johansson movie?
Yes.
There's some
but that has a
comparisons.
story.
It does.
That has a story where you can sort of, you don't get spoon-fed reasons, answers of like, oh, who are they? How long have they been here? What are they? We haven't done that one, have we?
No.
So I don't want to ruin that too much, but that is upsetting in visceral ways, but it still conforms. It's a very small, very indie feeling film, but it still conforms to the kind of arc. We meet the character, things are cruising along, something changes. That sets in motion a series of events that come to a resolution, And so at the end of the movie, I had an understanding of who was who and what had happened and what had gone wrong and where we ended up. And I didn't think, I can't get my head around that movie. But it is upsetting in some similar visceral ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's kind of what, from a mood standpoint,
it felt like a much more conventional film to me. Yeah, in terms of its structure and shape. This is like, what the hell is happening here?
There's one scene in this where he lures Heinrich to this bar, and Sam Neill goes into they go into the bathroom, and he goes to one of the stalls, and he acts like he's sick, and he stuffs stuff into the toilet paper, and then he gets him to, and he's like, oh, I'm sick, and he gets him to come in there, and then he hits him in the head with the top of the, he takes the lid off the toilet and hits his, and then stuffs his head in there and flushes the toilet
and sprinkles his drugs around, I guess, to make it look like he was high, and somehow
it's just like, what a bizarre way to kill somebody.
Is this the international spy now?
I guess maybe that was a spy. Yeah. So I don't know, but and the only other comparison I would make with this is the scenes where she's in this rundown apartment with the squid creature. That reminded me a good bit of the original Hellraiser. Have you ever seen that?
No.
That's one we ought to do sometime.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't love that corner of the genre. They're all from like a dimension of pain people, right? Is that
yeah, but it's not as, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence as to what it's not as gross as what you would think it is, but I almost have to guess that I'm just totally a guess here, but that Clive Barker had seen this, and that influenced, because I definitely had vibes of that. Because not to give anything away, but there's a woman is luring luring men into this house to kill them for this other guy that she's in love with, and that felt a lot like the scenes in this, but it's something we might try sometime because it's not real.
All right. I mean, I trust you if you think it's not going to
yeah.
break my fragile little.
No, I don't
brain.
think. I think there's the later ones are terrible, but the first one is really at the time when it originally came out, I thought, oh, this is terribly freaky, and then I've seen it recently, and it's you know, I don't think you would think it was like too. It's not torture porn-ish. I mean, there's blood in it and stuff, but I don't know. We might have to do. It'd be an interesting conversation, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I'm to kind of, you know, if you wanted to get into our another kind of point maybe that I make before we get into the wrap up is I could see maybe audiences watching this now, and you know, again, it you know, I don't know if he had just gone through, the director that is, had gone through a divorce or was going through a divorce, but I think there can be some criticism maybe made of some misogyny that this is kind of like, oh, women are crazy and, you know, irrational and all that, but Sam Neill is crazy in this too. I mean, you know, there's so
yeah, it's hard to know. Some of the characters espouse some sort of stuff like that, and it's hard to know what is supposed to just be that character expressing their worldview or saying something from the existential pain they're feeling, or the director believes that's how the world is and men and women. You know, it's hard to parse, but it's in there.
Yeah. And you do kind of wonder, you know, where does this kind of movie come from a person's mind? You know, I mean, it's
it feels, that's why I think it said it feels so personal. It feels cathartic to me. It feels like probably the director. Did the director write it too? Must have.
I think so.
It
yeah.
feels like an auteur's vision of, it just feels incredibly specific to the, you know, the mind behind it, the eye of the camera. And it feels,
he wrote it with someone else.
It feels very personal and very cathartic. Like this, maybe he went through a divorce, you know, that sort of was this shape, and they had a child, and it tore him apart. And this is him kind of exercising those demons and working through it, using art as sort of therapy, as a way to navigate through it.
Right.
That's what it feels like to me. It's harrowing.
And as, you know, as strange as it is and doesn't make sense and all of that, technically it's really fantastic. I feel, you know?
Yeah, the camera work,
filmmaking.
Yes. I think the only thing you could hold up in that argument is like, films have a certain structure. You had said something in a text to me offline a while ago there. You said, I just feel like the basics of filmmaking haven't changed in a long time. Like, you know, some movies feel like they could have been made, just pick a different decade and this would have fit into it, that the filmmaking hasn't fundamentally changed. I do think one aspect of that is whether or not it is true. The reason you see such formulaic stuff sometimes, and even when it doesn't feel formulaic, if you step back and you hold up the template of the formula to it, the formula is there. They've just done a great job with all the other stuff. So you're not feeling the formula, is that it's effective, right? The hero's journey, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's because it resonates with people. Audiences relate to the shape of that. You know, and I think you can certainly make a movie that is a good film that doesn't conform to those kind of expectations. But I do think that one way that translates to an audience is it's a little challenging, right?
Yeah.
My mind was constantly trying to find the formula. I was trying to find the framework to fit this into. And what is this? What is happening? You know, I think that's part of the point of the film. But it's like, well, I want to build an airplane that doesn't, isn't shaped like an airplane. And you say, okay, well, you can build whatever you want, and they can have many amazing features, but maybe it won't fly. Like maybe it'll get banned and be a lost. I don't know if this was financially successful or if that's even a goal or that's even why he made it. But he's clearly knows what he's doing as a filmmaker, and he's working with people
absolutely,
that know what they're doing as a filmmaker. And this hits technical marks, and the performances are incredible. I think what you're left with feels more like a personal, cathartic, kind of act of a diary. It was a film he felt he had to make for himself, and did this remarkable job with it. And what's left is a film that it can be challenging for an audience. If people don't get it, I'm just saying from one angle, if you make a movie and people don't get it and they walk out of being like, I don't get it, from one angle, that's a failure as a film, right? Films, I mean, unless you just made it for yourself and you don't ever show it to anybody and it's just the thing you go back and revisit. But, the idea is you put it out there and it wins awards at Cannes or whatever, and people see it and watch it and want to see it and tell their friends to go see it. And I just don't feel like this film is aiming at that. And I think it's still a remarkable movie. I don't regret for a second having watched it, but
oh yeah, for sure.
You say it looks amazing and all this is amazing, and I agree, but I think that it fundamentally defies some sort of structure and form basics that I think by design alienate the audience. And so you think, well, how interesting, you make a movie that alienates your audience. And then you have a conversation like, okay, well, why did you do that? And why would you do that? But we're having that conversation. Like, so,
with the formula, sometimes I wonder if films are as formulaic as what we think they are. And they certainly are to a degree, but also, like with the two of us, we've been watching movies for almost 50 years. So there aren't many formulas that we've seen all the formulas. You know what I mean? It's like, there
really aren't that many formulas. They're all versions of the same formula. And I think that some of the bad movies we watch don't conform to anything. They just wander around in what feels like a pointless way. And they're boring and maybe they feel self-indulgent and they're uninteresting because you don't care about the protagonist, right? There's many, many ways in which a movie can lose its audience. But I think that the formulas are there not because some executive dictated it has to be that way, because all the way back Shakespeare earlier, the Greeks, it's like, they hit upon this.
There are only so many stories. Yeah.
That people like, the story part of our brain likes to go on that arc. We love to meet, we love to meet the underdog, Perseus, right? I mean, he's a demigod, hardly an underdog, but his grandfather tried to kill him and his mother at birth, but the gods intervened, and look at the heroic things he did. He defeated the last Titan, and right. It's a Cinderella story. I mean, Perseus, Cinderella. I mean, we love this idea in America, certainly, of the underdog. And there's these, handful of stories that we like it to feel familiar, and we like it to feel like there's a triumph. And
as you said,
that we can sort of see why it fell apart. Like, oh, it's it's Romeo and Juliet. Like, we really wanted them to get together. It's a tragedy, but it was so close. Like, we see how it could have been there, but this one's a sad one because stupid, fate or humanity. And oh, why? But it's still super satisfying because we get the near miss. I don't know.
No, I agree. With the formula thing, I watched this with my sister and brother-in-law, and my brother-in-law, like, and as you said, this movie, he's not interested in the formula. He's, he doesn't care. But my brother-in-law says, oh, it's going to be, there's no real monster or anything. It's just all in her head. She's just imagining all of this. And it's like, because we've seen so many movies where they do that, that's the formula that you're expecting. But the first time you see a movie that does that, you're just like, oh my God, it's all in their head. None of this was real, but I guess you're used to the formulas and you're trying to make some sense of it and grasp onto that, but this movie doesn't care about that.
Yeah, and I think even deeper than that, this movie, it feels like this movie is saying not so much this is what divorce is like, but this is what my divorce felt like, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's all the technical amazingness of the different aspects of the filmmaking, the performances he got out of them, and the visual stuff that he came up with. And I could leave some of the high-flown philosophical language, whatever.
Right.
Didn't do anything for me. But visually, it hit me in the gut in a way that I, like you said in the beginning, I don't know what to compare this film to. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on that basis alone, I have to recommend it. I would put a big asterisk that's like, Mom, if you're listening, I don't think you're going to like this movie. So maybe you can skip this one. But if you're like us, that we're like cinephiles and we like horror and we like the kind of, movie making for its own sake, you got to see this. It's just crazy.
If you are tired of formulaic films and you want to see something that you haven't seen before, this is a really good one to watch. But yeah, as I said at the beginning, there's definitely a caveat of, there are a lot of people that would just hate this movie. I mean, they would just think it was awful. And yeah, if I told my parents to watch this, they would probably talk about this for the rest of their lives. Just like, you made us watch that terrible movie. What were you thinking? Why would you watch something like that? But
I actually had the thought, like, as I'm trying to think of things that I would want to curate, make like maybe on a quarterly basis at one of the theaters around here where, people can get a drink and maybe we have a food truck or something where there's something where people could come and we'll get a local radio. This would
be a great festival.
Somebody movie. Yeah, but probably not the festival that I'm doing because I'm focused on independent cinema, but something that I would curate as festival adjacent and say, look, this movie is 100% not for everybody, but if you've ever heard of it and you watch the trailer and you seem interested, we're going to screen it. You know what I mean? It's like,
and in the area where you live, where there are definitely some people there that are.
There's going to be some people that are down to like check out some crazy shit like this. But I think the trick is marketing it in such a way that, like, look, hey, watch the trailer, right? And if you watch the trailer and you go, yikes, not for me, then trust that instinct.
And yeah, I saw a lot of references because, like I say, this had gotten a lot of buzz. A lot of people were talking about this online, saying, wow, I've been looking for this for years and I've finally it's available and I've gotten to see it. Or people are just like, oh, I've heard of this movie before, and I want to check it out. And I saw, and they maybe say this is maybe in the trailer, I don't know, that it's the ultimate cult movie. And I don't know that I would agree with that because I think, like Rocky Horror is the ultimate cult
to
movie.
me.
This is not a.
It's a fun experience for insiders to go on. The Room is a great cult classic.
Yeah, The Room is a, Repo Man is a cult movie, but this is not a crowd pleaser.
We ought to do Repo Man.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. Yeah, Repo Man would be fun.
Long time.
But
anyway,
I would for adventuresome or curious people, or you just want to see something crazy that you've never seen before. If you like Sam Neill a lot, and if you just want to see actors just 100% go for it, because I was thinking there would be a lot of directors that could not get this performance out of actors. I think about I feel like I pick on him a lot with some of these podcast episodes, considering how much I love his movies, like George Lucas. Like, can you imagine George Lucas getting this performance out of
I don't think
actors? You know,
I don't think George Lucas.
he wouldn't
is
do this kind of movie, but
he's not an actor's director.
yeah.
He's a concept director.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
So-
George Lucas was revolutionary at the things George Lucas was revolutionary at. But you know, I've thought, like, if George Lucas, if his mind isn't, if there aren't some things that are a little on the spectrum with him, because he's so specific in world building, but he doesn't seem to have a real intuitive grasp on how people think and interact and behave.
That classic thing of Harrison Ford.
We gotta
Okay.
cut it. I'm at time.
Okay.
Anyway, ChrisandChrisTalkMovies@gmail.com. That's our handle. We're on the socials. Thank you. Like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. You gotta see this movie. It's crazy.
Especially if you have Shudder, it's on there and you can just watch it.
Get a free trial. It's nuts.
Absolutely.
Anyway, sorry, but it's
no problem.
bedtime. I got to put the kids to bed. So,
Yeah.
Chris and I, we will talk to you next week.